Alright, we've got a multiplayer skirmish of Sengoku Jidai. Although we are not in Japan for this one, we have Tibetan lords as our force versus Qing Green Standard Army. I'm playing a mirror match with my opponent that will not be recorded because I started playing it before I started recording things. But in that match, I'm sitting pretty defensively as a Chinese. And I promised my opponent that if we hosted a mirror match, I could play the Tibetans and I would play aggressively against him to make up for my cowardice. So I need to look at this map and figure out an army that can overcome a strong defensive position. He's likely to take cover on maybe this hill, rice paddies, forests with his infantry, and probably a fair amount of artillery. So I'll certainly want to max out on foot skirmishers, and I think I'll want to max out on mounted skirmishers as well to see if I can get behind him and pester that artillery. My infantry they're not great, but they're not terrible. They lack melee capabilities, and the only ones with impact capabilities are just light spearmen, which is trash. But they are also all warriors. They can move pretty quickly, and that is useful. They're also pretty cheap. So I think facing a Chinese army with our massive skirmishers, we don't have too much to fear from the cavalry, especially the Green Standard Army is sort of the lower tier provincial force of the Qing Empire, so they can't field very high quality horse. So with that said, I don't feel like I need to spend more on cavalry to overcome his cavalry, in which case we're going to get ranged infantry to overcome his footmen. The other thing is that most Chinese infantry is missile troops with 16% light spear, so their light spear effect comes into effect only when defending. So I won't have too much to fear from the charge except from his very few dedicated melee infantry. So we'll max on average matchlocks. We'll grab a couple raw ones too. We'll get some raw troops as well just to pad out the numbers, and I mean, maybe they'll just run away, but even if they run away, maybe the enemy will chase after them, and that would be their contribution. The large 800-man units, probably not advisable. Their large size makes them vulnerable to artillery, which the Chinese tend to have a lot of, and more than the 500 men don't actively take part in shooting or fighting. So all that extra manpower does is increase their overall resilience in melee. But a raw unarmored unit with no melee capability is not going to be resilient, whether it's large or not. So that's probably a waste of points. I might just sink some points into this very poor quality infantry and just get one additional unit of lancers. Alright, next turn. Okay, so I've chosen an army, and now we proceed to deployment. So I did go infantry heavy as the Tibetans, which is not a usual choice. We'll see if I suffer for it. I'll want to seize, if possible, control of this hill, and at least this forest and ridge, and ideally this forest as well. I want to seize this forest also. Of course, my opponent will probably not be so obliging. We'll get archers because they can have a wide field of fire. And then for close work in the forest, we'll bring matchlock men because they don't need to see very far to fight. I think I'm not even going to deploy any of my heavy horse on the left just because, there's difficult slope, there's forest, there's marsh, there's rice paddies. It's just not great. So we'll just heap them all in a giant battering ram to the right and see if they can find something to stab. Perhaps I'll keep these smaller ally brigade, 2 units in reserve. These are all average cavalry, so they need to not get shot at. There are both super heavy armored Tibetan cavalry and armored. These are just the regular armored sort. I'm fine with that. The Chinese deploy artillery, they deploy matchlock men, they deploy crossbows. These all ignore armor. In terms of melee combat, the Chinese infantry is, for in-game purposes, largely treated as unarmored and without scaled melee capability. There are exceptions. So if these guys can make contact and not bounce the impact, they should be able to cut down the opposition. The downsides are, because they are lancers in Sengoku Jidai, only bow cavalry can evade. Although they have 50% bow, light lancers mean they cannot evade. So I will have to be careful for that. We'll see how my opponent deploys. I also want to make clear that I unfortunately started recording too late to capture the mirror to this game, in which my opponent played as the Tibetans to my Green Banner army and utterly crushed me. He swept the field. I think it was 44-4 as the final score. Yeah, it was brutal. So we'll see if I can do any better. This terrain is quite terrible for cavalry, so that's too bad for me. But luckily I did mostly invest in infantry. And I am certainly interested in seeing what he has hidden away in those trees. These trees, this village, maybe these trees? It's hard to say. I don't think he has access to a lot of lights, but nevertheless. This hill's actually, in a way, kind of bags. It means that it's harder for me to simply hide my horsemen. There's a lot of artillery too, although only 2 batteries are long range, so I mean, it's not going to be fun to just be standing under artillery fire, but these green standard boobing are extremely dangerous. They are impact foot, and I really have nothing to counter that in terms of infantry, so I will have to either disrupt them with fire or find a way to zone of control lock them with horsemen. Speaking of horsemen, even though the terrain is bad, I am better off pushing for these flanks with my lancers, wading through these rice paddies, and getting back into this open space, or at least threatening flanks, even if I am disordered. Likewise, we need to, excuse me, hide these horsemen behind the trees. They are too vulnerable to artillery. So the plan will basically be to seize this forest first, then see if we can push our slingers into this forest and lurk over here with our cavalry. Try to do damage, try to draw off some units. We'll certainly seize this hill if we can. It might be dangerous to approach this forest. We might want to hang back here, maybe right along here. So this way, if he charges at me out of the forest, he's disordered and running uphill. But we're also, I believe, protected from his artillery. So we can lurk here behind this forest, ready to get on this ground if we need to, and push behind with our lights, again, to try to draw off units and cause a distraction. When we've done some damage, or at least drawn some attention to the flanks, then we'll go with the full-on frontal attack of infantry, which will get bloody because once we get into range, there will be 2 more artillery units that come into play. Alright, so that's the plan as of this turn. We'll see if it remains at all intact. These things have a way of, not doing so. Next turn. Yes, we'll be taking cannon fire for quite a while. Well, we cleared our first forest. Nothing on the outside so far. The Qing army list can bring a few low-quality skirmishers, but I think only like 3 units, and they're raw, so not terribly concerned about it. And our center is just gonna have to take it, I guess. There's a good way I can go under cover. Suppose I could shove another couple units to this forest for now. Maybe see if that helps a little bit. Perhaps we can take cover here and in here until we're in position on the flanks, and then we can come out and sweep across the center again. Alright, next turn. Next turn, the cannonade continues. Movement. Sort of. Archers to here, I suppose. And I keep pushing around. Get these units to cover. Hopefully that does the trick. I'm not actually sure. The line of sight can be difficult to predict. Okay, it's looking good for seizing this forest. Might take 1 volley of archery, but they're a raw unit. They will have turned to fire, so not a big deal. I don't really know what I'm doing with these horsemen. I just wanted to get them away from the artillery. They're going to either have to charge out this way into the rice paddy or this way into the rice paddy and the artillery either way. So maybe I shouldn't have bothered investing even in the one unit of extra cavalry. But it's too late to regret that now. Okay. We'll see if we are in sightline here. I don't want to push too hard on this hill with non-light troops until these light horsemen are in position to start distracting some units. So for now, we'll call that good. And it's one nice feature of Field of Glory is the colored flags in the units. I've realized that it's hard to tell apart the Qing and Tibetan banners. That is what it is. But basically, as far as we can tell so far, the enemy is here. And presumably also here. But we'll find out. Next turn. Oh, he can't see us. That's too bad. But maybe nobody else. I think no one else. We will slink into the forest. Yep. Took that volley as expected. Alright, so we'll take some cover. And it looks like our distraction is beginning to have an effect. But no need to get reckless yet. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Now, if these move over here to engage my slingers, we can pull the cavalry up. Maybe even push the infantry out. This foot could advance as well. I don't really know what these horsemen are going to do, what with all the rice paddies, but they're going to do something. Worst case scenario, they can tank some bullets and shoot their small number of bows. But here's the overall situation. Our opponent is on a hill, probably in this village and forest, and holding the rice paddies with mass artillery support. And we are moving behind him with light cavalry and to its flanks with light slingers and armored lancers, with our main infantry force taking cover in the forests for the moment. Alright, onward. Next turn. Alright. And that's something I wish they had patched out, where you can see the fallback in hidden terrain. It's not the end of the world. As you can see, I already knew, or practically knew, there was someone in there anyway. Okay. We'll force some movement here. I will wait to advance here until something happens with this unit as it's getting harassed now. They'll either push forward or fall back. One way or another, that'll make it easier for us to advance. And there's no rush. We still need to figure out what exactly is in here and decide what to do with these 4 units. We still have 15 turns left. That's plenty of time. Next turn. Oh. That's highly unpleasant. That is in fact hugely unpleasant. Okay. We will need to reevaluate our plans then. Right then. It's awkward. Very awkward. I think we will have to accept some artillery fire. And we will need to push. Well, as my cat so eloquently reminded me, it was time to feed them, so hopefully we can now have peace to continue this bloodshed. Greatly dislike being forced to attack unprepared like this. So much careful planning for nothing. Apparently, peace is not to be had in this world. Oh. Why, hello. Okay, onward. Next turn. I've had to move much faster than I originally intended. It's going alright so far. My main concern, well, other than that, is going to be his unit as well. And that, these units of boobing, they're impact foot swordsmen. I don't really have an answer to that in broken ground. Although in the open, my lancers can take care of them without much difficulty. Okay, our light horse will harass the artillery when they can get close enough. And our slingers will start working on whoever is hiding in here. And yes, we have to risk disruption for our lancers, moving in the open against guns, because we need to try to come to the rescue against these swordsmen, which we have nothing that can fight them in melee, even if we disrupt them. I'm going to try something a bit risky. And it worked. And we could only charge that unit because it was in the rice paddy, as lights cannot charge non-lights in open ground. Can either use these slingers to start putting pressure on this raw infantry unit, or on the swordsmen. I think I'm going to elect for starting work on the swordsmen. This is a horrible cavalry country, but we really have no choice. We have to get in there. Next turn we'll move these two in to shoot at this unit. That was good. A superior unit maybe would have held his fire until this unit shot. So this unit has attached light guns. I think they were called Jingals. They're basically gigantic matchlock weapons deployed on bipods. So not exactly cannons, but certainly bigger than a handheld firearm. But they were only firing those and it exhausted their fire. I was hoping for a rally, but because nobody's in charge range, I'm going to keep my commander here to try to rally. If they frag, I'll probably switch him out. And the Lancers are going to have to lurk here so they can cover against any charges into the open. The Slingers I'll keep back until reinforcements arrive from behind. And it is a race. Once these 3 units arrive, we will have problems, so we need to work rapidly into these rice paddies and hills. Alright, onward. Next turn. And we must brave the cannon fire. Okay, lucky so far. That is most unpleasant. Bad timing. Okay, what can we do here? We're gonna take a risk. And we suffer for it. Then, indeed, then we'll lock this impact foot in place and try to disrupt it with fire. Get them out of dodge and hopefully rally up. These guys are really in the way, and I need them to not be in the way. Okay, so by breaking them, we can turn this unit and zone of control lock the impact foot. They will still beat up on our matchlock men, even disordered, because they are generaled up. But if they do so, they'll expose their flank to both these archers and this cavalry. Granted, this cavalry can be zone of control locked by the approaching enemy cavalry, the Kuijia Chibing, but that still won't protect from these archers, so that can give us a chance. These artillery were no longer protected, as they were only adjacent to cavalry and not infantry. Very good. Okay. We'll draw fire. Too bad. This unit will probably be disrupted next turn then. More boobing coming in. Right. Let's force this unit to make a choice. It can turn around and shoot back, or it can stay facing this way and get harassed. Now we know there's a unit of archers in this forest. Or village, I'm sorry. We could push it to force them to keep shooting at our light horse, which can then withdraw. Probably do that. I normally don't like exposing myself to fire like that, but I think the pressure is a necessity. Okay. I think instead of trying to do something about this situation, I'm just going to ignore it and push. This is possibly foolish. But we're going to try it. And perhaps this unit of raw warriors can be reassigned to covering a flank because they cost like 12 points. They're basically useless. So they'll be a nice little speed bump for us. Alright. That's the situation. We have the enemy basically surrounded, but he has a lot of deadly units still standing. Next turn. Oh, very lucky to not disrupt in both of those instances. Ooh, we passed a cohesion check, and now we just have to flank charge that. Yeah, that seemed like a possibility. Okay, lots of decisions to make here. Wow, even disrupted against a raw unit with the general, we can just crash into these guys. Well, very good, let's do that. And disperse these guns. Then start putting some pressure on this unit of the Green Standard Chongbing. Right. Take one for the team, maybe. Maybe not. We're just gonna get shredded then. Run away. Okay. Going for a frag here. No dice. What about here? Very good. Get in there. Interesting choice. Okay. Right then. This cavalry unit is raw and disordered, so don't fear to approach it. Get in there. Very good. Okay. These units of boobing are still a problem. I could try to force a break by breaking this unit. Or I could hit this unit in the flank and then accept moving this unit forward as a sacrificial lamb. That might be the smart play. so in Sengoku Jidai, medium foot cannot charge non-light cavalry, with the rationale basically that a unit that appears to be stationary in melee in reality is very much not stationary, and so an infantry unit really would just get shredded if it broke formation to fight horsemen like that. Okay, we're going to have to just accept this unit getting massacred. Alright, this is going very well. I don't think it will wrap this turn, but it is possible. I mean, really, this battle shows a danger of staying too stationary, even in a pretty strong defensive position, and the advantages of having more lights than your enemy, which, to be fair, is not my opponent's fault. The green standard list does not have very many lights, and in fact, it's not a very good list. I lost my match as Tibetan to his green standard quite badly. That was just unfortunately before I had started recording for the channel. So, onward. Next turn. Goodbye. Oh, they survived one round of combat. Very good. Well, we'll just kind of get in the way here. Could still shuffle past them, but by then I hope to clean this up. Speaking of which, alright. All right. So in Pike and Shot and Sengoku, you can fire with ranged units, even in the same round that they've been in melee. Okay, so this should be the last turn of this fight. It was unfortunate for my opponent that these three units were late arriving, although if I'd been a little bit slower, if things had gone a little bit less smoothly, their intervention could have been decisive in terms of, showing up behind me. And I had the choice of either splitting my forces to turn around and face them or just kind of blundering forward, which is what I chose to do in the end. But again, this shows the difficulties of sticking to the terrain. The terrain is not always the shape you need it to be. And so, in any of these three games, if you find a nice patch of terrain, odds are there's a way to approach it from the side that makes it less useful, and you need to move to adjust for that. And if you don't move, things are gonna go badly regardless of the terrain because you are locally outnumbered. For example, normally throwing lancers into rice paddies is a terrible idea, but when those lancers are facing off against just a few infantry units and they are supported by quite a few more of their own infantry, it's suddenly worth it to do normally poor matchups like that. So we'll see how this wraps up, barring any crazy rally stuff. Right, and our final turn. I'll have to try another match soon, maybe after the Digital League is done, using a Qing army against the Tibetans and see if I can eke out a win somehow. Yeah, there we have it. Till next time.